And it is time for ElseWords. This is our discussion, and we're just going to discuss about Tom. We're going to pretend he's not even here, and me and Corey are just going to gab about him.
Oh, great!
No. We're going to have we're going to talk with Tom because like I mentioned in his introduction, this guy, Tom, besides being one of my podcasting heroes here, he's doing so many things, hosting so many shows, and
that Tom Merritt is a hoopy fruit who really knows where his towel is.
Exactly. But yes, we figured we would, ask you, and also because you got Pilot X coming out here in a little bit and all that. So, so Tom, well, first off, can I just say thank you for naming your teams in FSL tonight, because I use them for fantasy football.
Oh yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. That's great. That's it's team effort. Me and Justin both.
Yeah, I will say it's fun to see that the trophy for my fantasy football league, when we actually had one, was won by the LA Guardians of the Galaxy.
Ah, fantastic. That was one of my favorite jokes. The Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim joke on the Guardians of the Galaxy.
And then this year I had, oh gosh, what was the team? I'll have to think of the team, but I didn't do quite so well with the other team. Like, just couldn't get it. Should have kept with LA Guardians of the Galaxy. But yeah, so
Xandar.
I think I did a different team, because I was looking through. I'm like, all right, I need to get a different one. I am actually going to check real quick, but no. So I mean, how do you come up with all these different ideas for shows to do? Like I mean, like we've mentioned, you've got the Damn Fine podcast, you've got, FSL Tonight's, Cord Killers, DTNS. Some of them seem a little obvious from past works, but others it's just like, okay, let's take a listen.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the ideas come from. It's a combination of my interests intersecting with something that people seem to be interested in talking about, intersecting with people that I want to work with. So, I mean, Current Geek is essentially Scott Johnson and I saying, let's do a show about all the things that both of us like to talk about.
And the stuff that doesn't make it into your shows throughout the week.
Yeah.
It's sort of the catch-all for all the other geek stuff.
Totally. It's just a chance for us to shoot the breeze and have some cool folks on and talk with them. FSL Tonight particularly came out of a post Dragon Con discussion between myself, Justin Robert Young, and Veronica Belmont, where we were seeing people with these T-shirts that kind of were imitating sports teams, and I think the one that set me off was the fantasy baseball T-shirt, where it's a wizard with a baseball bat, and I was like, what if there was a league and the teams were all of these different tribes, right? Like the Star Trek people, and you were cheering for them, and it just kind of built itself from there, because Justin and I both are also sports fans, and Justin's a huge fan of Sports Talk Radio, and I've watched and listened to enough myself that I could mimic that style, and so it just became fun. But the other stuff, yeah, Brian Brushwood and I wanted to do a show together, so we came up with Frame Rate, which eventually became Cord Killers, and that's just kind of the way it goes with all of these.
Yeah. I think that was more of a self-validating question, because that's how this show came to be too, but it was with Glenn Rubenstein before he said, I'm too busy, I can't do it. And me and Corey were like, all right, we'll continue it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the real question is, how do you find all the time? It seems like that's the problem, is that you come up with a great concept for a show, but being able to execute that show regularly and hitting a level of production to make it both worth your time and to be able to show it to fans and have the fans feel like it's worth their time. That's complicated. Now you're new to this, and that's why we're leading you through this whole thing.
Thank you.
But you work with people like Veronica and Justin and Brian and Scott and Ron, that are all pros, that all know how to make shows, that have been doing this longer than almost anybody. When it comes to the podcasting world, you know all the experts and have worked with all the experts, I think. But it's tough. It's tough to just say, okay, we're going to talk about a show that's 20 years old and yes, has a revival coming up, but can we find the audience for this show at this point? Or is it still either forming because the new series hasn't started, or is it just missed its mark because 20 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, with Damn Fine Podcast, it was essentially me and Ron Richards emailing each other in excitement that Showtime announced they were going to bring back the show, and immediately saying we should do a podcast about it. And all the shows I do have started with, I really want to do X. And then we say, okay, well, how would we make a show about that takes the excitement we have and turns it into something enjoyable to listen to? And I think that's one of the keys, is doing things that you're interested in. A couple other tricks are to go live to tape so that you don't have a lot of editing time, and using the listeners and the audience to help guide you with emails and things like subreddits and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you keep it interesting with great guests and stuff too.
Definitely.
It's nice every week I'm finding new people or people that I just haven't heard for a while show up on Current Geek, and I'm always super excited. Although I have to say my favorite guest still continues to be Jenny Josephson.
Oh, Jenny's great. Yeah,
brilliant.
That's awesome.
She's so good. Beat has threatened to bring her onto the show at some point, and I always get nervous about it.
Oh, she'd be great. I'm sure she'd love to do it too.
Oh, she'd be great. I would just be like looking at her like Chris Farley looking at Paul McCartney. Just, hi, you're awesome. But yeah, I think that's the key, is that you have to love and believe in what you're talking about. And if you don't love it, people will pick up on that really fast.
Yeah.
But you, to me, are not a typical podcaster, because one of the things that I've always looked at you as is you're like the Walter Concrete. Walter Concrete. No, I can't.
Walter Concrete. Yeah, that's just
Walter
a big block of concrete.
You're just a solid mass of man. You're a newscaster to me. You're someone that I trust to bring me a story and not weigh it down with your opinion more than the actual details of the story. Whereas, I mean, this is an opinion show. This is a review show. This is a news, but we put our spin on things show. And there's a lot of those out there. And I get that. I love that. I value that. But you're someone who always sees things from multiple angles, and you always lead with, full disclosure, my wife works for Now Fandango, right. Which we've stolen a lot on this show. And I think that that's something that's very incredible. It is in a point in time right now where things are very politically charged. I would always trust you to bring me a story no matter what it's about, and I would get the actual facts of it before I get the opinion. And if you were going to state opinion, you would let me know ahead of time first, this is just opinion. And that, I think, challenges me when I do stuff, that I don't just lead with opinion first, or that I at least make it very clear that I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's the hard thing, is to actually know what you know and what you don't know, not to get too Rumsfeld about it. Like to say like these are the things that we're sure of. I've actually, taken the time to double check and say and see that the reliable sources say this, and which are the things that people are saying, but we don't know if it's actually true. And then what's my opinion? Because I'm not trying to be Walter Cronkite. I'm not even trying to be a newscaster. I'm just trying to start from a position of good information. So especially when I do Daily Tech News Show, but even in my other shows, I want to lay out the actual facts for people to say this, everything is subject to interpretation. Everything is subject to spin, but there are certain things that we can all agree are true. Like IDC said that Android shipped 97 million units last quarter. We can all debate how accurate IDC is, but it's got a pretty good track record, and we're not going to dispute that IDC isn't saying that, right? And then we go to, well, somebody's saying that next quarter Android devices are going to fall because they're going to stop using, bundling in Gmail, or they're going to charge for that. And it's like, okay, who's saying that? How reliable are they? And then we can go to opinion. Then we can have the discussion of, based on the things that we know and how reliable those things are, what do we think? And to me, that's just a good way to have a better discussion.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I've always looked at you with such value. Going back to your CNET days, is that you're someone that you would say something and I would feel absolute trust in what you were saying.
Wow.
Before I thought of you as being just entertaining and funny guy Tom Merritt. It's like, no, but here's Tom Merritt, and Tom Merritt knows his shit.
Well, I try to. Thank you. I'm glad you think so anyway. So the fooling is working.
You fooled one more person.
Well, and the other thing, going back to the CNET days, especially on Buzz Out Loud, I'm also very argumentative. So, when I talk to Molly and Veronica and Jason, whatever side they took, I would try to figure out, like, okay, but what's the other side? What's the other angle?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's honestly too, since Corey's going to say, hey, here's how this influenced me. I think that's influenced me too, because it's like, I've always been able to see both sides fairly easily, but never quite verbalize both sides. Like, even with my day job as a phone salesman in a Target, I'm an Android fan. I mean, I've got freaking Samsung watch, Samsung phone, all that stuff. I've, eat, sleep, and breathe, Android. I don't let that affect when people are like, oh, I want to get an iPhone. I'm like, sure. And then I'm like, here's what they have about it from what I know, usually from what I've heard from Tom Merritt. And I'll spout off the facts that I know, and they're like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. I'm like, but if you want, there's also this thing that's coming out here soon, or this what you can get over here. And if it sways them, cool. If not, oh well, they got what they want.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a lot of that from Leo as well. I mean, Leo really was what brought me into working in tech. What got me pushed over to working at the Tech Bench in Best Buy and working for Geek Squad down the road, and feeling like I wanted to educate people about tech as much as possible, and not just from the point of view of like, oh, well, AMD is the best processors versus Intel or whatever. Going through this phase, it's like, no, here's the reason why I would prefer it, but that's not necessarily your usage case. But that's the thing, is that through Leo and you, I've discovered other people that I respect and value so much, like Scott Johnson, Jason Howell, Eileen and Jason. I found without even realizing Eileen's relationship to you, but certainly through them being a twit, and it's just, there's so many great people that I think you've all sort of congrued together, and it makes a perfect sense. And it gives you this great base that if you want to be doing things like podcasting, or doing tech journalism, or doing technology in a teaching respect, or anything else, these are the people that you kind of go and you draw from.
Yeah, it's like the Tech TV extended family, because, Leo, obviously the master at help and how to, came not just out of Tech TV, obviously had a big career before that, but he sort of led the charge out of Tech TV with Twit, and Kevin Rose and Roger Chang, who produces for me now. And there's just so many people who started to do things. And then we started to all pick up folks as well. So, Molly Wood and Veronica, I feel like, are part of that same lineage, even though those two never worked at Tech TV. They sort of embody that same spirit. And then Brian Brushwood and Justin Robert Young, and for me, that's just my branch of the tree. There's all these different people doing all these great things.
Yeah, there are the Beatles, and then there are the people that were influenced by the Beatles, and then 5 generations later, there are the people who were influenced by those bands. That you go, yeah, but remember the Beatles? That you kind of owe a lot to them, and you don't realize
like, no, who are the Beatles? And
yeah.
Weren't they on a video game before?
Yeah. They were a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
but no, that 5 generations, that's me, because I came in through Brian to then discover, go up the tree, and I'm like, oh wow. And now it's like I'm doing this here where I'm talking with Corey and Beat and Evan on a weekly basis, and I'm getting to meet people that, like I said, are podcasting heroes of mine, and just flat out interesting people to talk to. And it's like, this is cool. If I could do this for a living, I would do this. Just sit here and just talk to people. you know?
Well, that's the beautiful thing of what the internet has done. And it's the thing that I'm always constantly on guard to identify if we're starting to lose it, which is that permissionless ability, not just to innovate. You hear Silicon Valley people talking all the time about permissionless innovation, but permissionless contact. Just all of us being able to go out there and meet and talk and share ideas without necessarily having someone in between that says, oh, well, you have to pay for that, or you have to ask for that. You're like, you pay to get into the internet, and then that's it. Once you're out there, you can do what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, I hope so too.
So speaking of creating art and losing the gatekeepers to your audience, tell us a little bit about writing Pilot X. Now, you've self-published stuff before, but Pilot X you've done through Inkshares, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, Corey, it's a time travel story. It's another time travel story. But yeah, this is what I've gotten the habit of doing over the years was writing a book during National Novel Writing Month, which happens every year in November, and then taking a little while, usually a few years, to polish the book up, give it to an editor, get it cleaned up, and then self-publish. And Inkshares came along, and we started working with them on Sword and Laser. And what they do is say, look, you've got an idea for a book, put it up on Inkshares. If you can get enough people to pre-order it, we'll publish it. So they have two levels. One's called the Quill level, which is basically self-publishing on steroids. If you get 250 people to pre-order your book, they'll publish it as an ebook, and they'll get it out there in front of people. They won't do the full publishing work, but they'll do, they'll do a light edit, and they'll do a little more than you would get if you just went on Amazon and published it yourself on CreateSpace. If you get 750 pre-orders, then they treat you as a signed author. So instead of having editors doing slush reads and talking to agents, they let the crowd pick what books they'll publish. And those fully published books get a full-on edit, they get a copy edit, they get a cover treatment, they get a narrator for the audiobook, they get sent to Publishers Weekly and put in the books in print, and everything that a normal publisher would do, even up to shopping it around for movie and TV rights and things like that. So I decided, after we co-published as an imprint with Inkshares a few books, I decided to just put one of my NaNoWriMo books up there instead of self-publishing it, and was lucky enough to get enough pre-orders, and it's coming out March 14th.
Now, I don't mean to steal your thunder there, but do you mean books like the Life Engineered?
I didn't even have the video fully up, and I saw the bottom of it. I'm like, oh, that's JF's book. I recognize that book anywhere.
JF was the introducer of us to Inkshares. I think he was the introduction for a lot of people, but certainly in the podcasting community, to what Inkshares did. And we were very excited to see how successful he's been with it. His next book is coming up for them. And then I was listening to him on Mind of a Geek that he was on this weekend today, and he's writing some books for Ed Greenwood, which is incredible. Now, that's not through Inkshares, but it's still like, this is a guy who just a couple years ago was publishing his first book and doing it through essentially a crowdfunded thing. I think that's brilliant. And I think it's really cool to see you pick up on that too, because you have been publishing books for a long time, and I've followed you with doing your Nano stuff. I've tried Nano a couple of times. I haven't gotten to the polish and edit part yet, but it's still incredible to me to see something that you've done, that you do as a personal challenge to yourself, and then you take it to that next level and you put it out there and show it to an audience. Yeah,
it's a world of difference to have a team of people helping you versus just going out and saying, okay, I have a friend who's an editor, I'll hire her to do an edit, and she does a great job, and she's a professional. So when I got the editor through Inkshares, it was a very familiar process, but it's also, a one pass situation. And then I just put that out, right? I didn't have anybody else looking at it. I didn't have a second editor or anything like that. And it's up to me to go out and tell people about it. And the reason I did that was sheerly out of laziness. I didn't want to pursue an agent. I didn't want to pursue marketing. I just wanted to write a story and have some people read it and tell me what they thought of it. With Inkshares, I was like, all right, well, let's step it up to the next level, not fully to the agent publisher level, but almost there. And what I had learned with JF's book and the other Sword and Laser books that we did was this is a real publisher. What Inkshares does, and I didn't realize this until we were going through all of the, God in the Shed or The Life Engineered and the other books, is that they're not kidding around. Like this is all the things that a publisher does. They are a real publisher. The only difference is it's up to the crowd to decide what goes on their list.
Yeah, instead of having somebody who goes out there and headhunts for writers, you have them come to you and you have them sort of prove themselves by being able to draw an audience in the first place. Yeah, which is not a terrible way to go. I mean, you as a self-published author, you try to build your audience yourself. You try to do it either through podcasting or through social media, just in general, whatever you can do to kind of build it up and say, hey, also, I wrote this thing. Maybe you want to check it out. I'd love to hear what you have to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I take all of that experience and then build up the pre-orders to get it going and then handed it over to something. And it's, I'm not going to lie, it's a thrill to see Publishers Weekly writing up Pilot X. It's a huge thrill to see Gary Whitta with a pull quote on the front of the review copy that went out, listed as, screenwriter of Rogue One. It's crazy. And seeing it up in Audible is fantastic. It's a whole different level of publishing.
As a fan, I get those emails that come in about once a week or so from Inkshares that just say, hey, here's how many people discovered Pilot X this week. Here's how many people bought Pilot X this week. And I always get super excited because I'm like, Tom just sold more books, and that's through Inkshares itself. Now, is that also showing the numbers sold through Amazon or other places?
I think that's just the stuff that Inkshares is selling directly. No, I don't think that includes pre-orders and things like that. That's
just really truly awesome, and I'm always excited for you when I see stuff like this take off, because you're a multi-talented person, but it's one of those things that I don't think people realize, the things that you do outside of podcasting, or when they're surprised, like, oh, what's Tom doing this show about other stuff when I thought he was a tech guy?
Yeah, for sure. No, I've always wanted to write. I've been writing longer than I've been podcasting, and I've always wanted to talk about different things than just technology. I was doing other things besides technology before I even started working on the web at Tech TV. Those are just the things that kind of rose to prominence first. And it doesn't mean I don't enjoy doing them. I totally do.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like you created, or you're one of the creators of the business of tech reporting. Because I don't think there was a lot of that. There certainly wasn't the focus on it. It was like, okay, you get the occasional things. And I grew up reading Family Computing Magazine and PC World and all those other things too. But to have it become like, oh, now there's a station that you can watch that's full of this information. Right. Like I lived off of Tech TV for a couple of years there when it was going strong.
Me too.
And, yeah.
I paid my salary.
It pretty much was 90% of my consumption.
Wow, that's great. I miss it.
Yeah, but at the same time, the fact that you guys have gone on to take control of your own destiny with it, and you didn't let it drying up affect you to the point where you stopped doing what you were doing, or you moved over to something else, which would have been okay. It's not like we would have lost Tom Merritt, but it still would have been.
Well, one of the things that one of my first jobs at the Screensavers was coming up with the topic of the day. And essentially what I had to do was look over all the news of the day and prepare a short bit about each one to present in our daily production meeting so we could pick which one would become our main poll question at the top of the show. And then I would write a column about it. And that process is essentially the process that grew into Buzz Out Loud and Tech News Today and now Daily Tech News Show, which is look at all the tech news of the day, write up short bits about them, and then expand on the ones that are the most interesting.
Yeah, and when you're not doing that, you make an almanac about it.
Yeah, right. About just keep all the events in history and keep adding to it.
So, if you could do a podcast about anything that you're not doing right now, what would that be?
Like, I mean, that's a horrible question. You're tempting me to like come up with even more ideas, which I don't need. I come up with ideas about this all the time. I'm like, and some of my friends like Justin make fun of me when I'm like, hey, I got an idea for a new podcast. He's like, what's new? But yeah, I've recently, one of the things that I've wanted to do is like a weekly essay show where I just maybe sometimes with a guest and maybe sometimes just me, just kind of dig deep into what I think about a particular issue, and not necessarily a technology issue, like just could be anything. I've often thought about doing a This Week in Everything, where I invite folks on and all my guests each bring in one burning issue. So it's kind of a similar idea to the essay episode, but sort of leaving the door wide open so that somebody can just bring in something that they're most passionate about. And then the trick there is having good enough bookings that you have a variety of people that are willing to comment on each other's ideas and expand all of our understanding of it.
Yeah. I think that's also a show that I've plotted out in my head more than a little bit. And
a couple times in post shows.
Yeah, I think that there's something that when you have such great stimulating conversations with fantastic guests all the time, it starts to make you think about things in a more philosophical nature.
Yeah.
And you're drawn more to the discussion and the back and forth than you are to just review shows and comics or horror movies like I do on my other show. It's like I want to go deeper with these people because I have such a great time talking to them. Well, I think that probably brings us to the close of the show. I do want to just make one more little fanboy statement. A few years ago in my role-playing group, we did a superhero game. And the basis for my superhero character, which is now the basis for a series of books that I am plotting out and trying to work on, is you.
Oh, okay.
Not you specifically. He's not a podcaster. He's a younger gentleman, but my whole inspiration was based around Tom Merritt, and the character's name is actually Merritt, as like a merit badge. It's one of those things that I've always kind of like had in the back of my head. It's like someday I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be about Tom Merritt, and I'm going to be able to go up to him and show it to him and just say, thank you for this.
Well, I am extremely honored. And one of the books that is still being edited, and I'm going to self-publish. I probably won't put this one on Inkshares.
You can say it's me. I'm okay with that.
Well, it's not based on you, sadly. It's not quite that much Turnabout is Fair Play, but it's based on the hosts of The Angry Chicken, because the year that I was writing that NaNoWriMo, they had just launched their show, and I had their voices in my head, and I was like, I can make all these characters talk like these three people, and they're cool people, and it's fun. So I guess the reason I'm saying that is I totally understand that idea of like having a personality in your head, and you're like, oh, I want to just make that into a character. So I'm honored. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I think Eileen's in there too.
Woo! I'll tell her.
So, Tom, where's the easiest place for people to find the things that you do?
Yeah, probably the website, tommerritt.com, TOMMERRITT.com. It collects together a page with links to all my shows and blog posts for every show as that gets posted, and all kinds of good stuff like that.
Nice. And if you listeners want to contact us by leaving us a voicemail, you can do that at 805-328-3966, or you can email us mail@ElseNerds.com. All of our subscription links can be found under gncast.com/subscribe. The Facebook page, just search for Galactic Netcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. The show is at ElseNerds. The network is at Galactic Netcasts. Our producers, Beatmaster80, Mr._Fusion. I can be found at that Gregor. Corey, where can people find you?
You can find the comics that I help publish every week at don'taskcomics.com.
All right, and the final thing that's to be said is this has been a Don't Tell Glenn production. We will see you next week.
Or else Tom Merritt.